Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time to a world without central heating, puffer jackets, or that smug electric kettle humming in your kitchen. You open your eyes in a small medieval village, and your breath instantly fogs in the air like dragon smoke. The ground crunches underfoot, frost creeping across every roof, and a little stream nearby has frozen into glassy silence. You probably won't survive this, sorry, but let's pretend you do, just for fun. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you are in the world right now, and what time you're listening. Midnight in Chicago, dawn in Manila. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first frost comes suddenly, like a messenger that nobody invited but everybody feared. You step outside your little timber and thatch cottage, and there it is, white crystals spreading like lace across the fields, glittering on fence posts, curling up the last stubborn blades of grass. Pretty, sure, but pretty in the way a lion is pretty when it licks its lips. Beauty here means danger. You know, this sight signals months of hunger, dark, and bone-deep cold. You shiver and tug your cloak tighter. Every villager you pass wears the same look, jaw set, brow furrowed, as if already calculating. Do we have enough firewood? Enough grain? Will the sheep survive? Will we survive? People don't have the luxury of coasting through the winter. They prepare or they perish. Your first stop is the woodpile. Fire is everything now. No fire means no cooking, no heat, no light once the sun dips at 4 in the afternoon. Villagers stack logs as high as their huts, praying the pile will last. Historians still argue whether peasants had free access to woodland, or if lords charged them fees for every bundle. Either way, you know the rule. Carry until your arms ache. Then carry some more. You drag branches, split logs, and gather kindling. Even the children help, toddling along with twigs like pine-sized lumberjacks. Everyone pitches in. You're exhausted, but stopping early isn't an option. Tomorrow might bring snow so deep you can't even see the ground. Next comes the roof. Your cottage is warm only if it stays dry. Thatched roofs, made of straw or reeds, look charming from a distance. But up close, they're basically haystacks balanced overhead. If snow seeps in and melts, you'll wake in a puddle. So you climb a shaky ladder, wedge moss and clay into gaps, and stomp the thatch firm. You imagine slipping, falling, and explaining to your medieval neighbors that you're from the future and broke your ankle fixing their roof. They wouldn't buy it, just another winter casualty. Back inside, you check the walls. They're wattle and daub sticks woven together, smeared with mud, straw, and maybe some manure, if you're lucky. Yes, that's medieval insulation. Cow poop. Not exactly the pink fiberglass rolls you find in a hardware store. You smear fresh mud in cracks, and you're weirdly grateful. The smell might not win awards, but at least it keeps the wind out. You pause, rub your hands, and realize warmth here isn't about luxury. It's about survival math. Lose too much heat, and you freeze. Burn too much wood too fast, and you run out before spring. Everything is balance. The clothes on your back matter too. You layer linen undergarments, scratchy wool tunics, and maybe, if you're lucky, a cloak edged in fur. Fashion sense isn't the point, warmth is. The wool comes from your own sheep, shorn in summer, spun through long hours of work, and woven with calloused fingers. You joke silently that medieval people invented sweater weather centuries before Instagram hashtags, and still, you feel the cold. The wind slices through cracks, the chill gnaws your toes. At night, you and your family huddle together beneath rough blankets. Privacy. Forget it. Medieval families slept in the same room, sometimes the same bed. Add chickens in baskets, pigs in pens, even a cow or two inside. It sounds strange to modern ears, but that body heat makes the difference between a night of shivering and a night of sleep. The cow isn't just livestock, it's your space heater. The first nights after frost are eerie. The village grows quiet earlier than usual, smoke twisting from chimneys into the icy sky. Dogs bark less, birds vanish, and every creak of wood sounds sharper. You lie awake, listening to the wind moan through the cracks, and you wonder if spring will ever come. Still, there's a rhythm to it. You fetch wood, mend walls, stir porridge, and check livestock. You try not to think about how long the winter will last. Some winters stretch 5 or 6 months. Others bring cruel surprises, storms that crush roofs, floods of melted snow, or bitter hunger when stores run thin. Villagers whisper about the hungry gap, those bleak weeks when last year's food is gone but the new crops haven't sprouted. You shiver again, this time not from cold. Quirky detail. Some medieval folks believed the first frost carried spirit-steamy ice demons dancing across fields, biting at noses and fingertips. A silly superstition, maybe, but when you feel frost sting your skin, you half believe it yourself. After all, every breath looks like smoke in the air. Who's to say it isn't a soul drifting? The frost deepens, the ground hardens. You tell yourself you're ready, even if you know no one ever really is. You pat the woodpile, check the patched roof, pull your cloak tight. Winter has arrived, and it won't be gentle. You crawl under the covers with your family. The cow sighs in the corner. Your youngest child snores softly, and the embers glow faintly in the hearth. Outside, frost thickens, spreading white fingers across the land. You close your eyes and whisper a prayer, half to God, half to the frost demons, that you'll make it through the long night. The woodpile is no longer a neat stack of logs against your cottage, it's your treasure chest, your fortress, your insurance policy against winter itself. You look at it the way someone in the modern world might look at a bank account balance. Every log is a coin, every bundle of kindling a little deposit, and when the frost bites harder, you'll be spending fast. So, today you trudge into the woods. The frost crunches beneath your boots, and your breath smokes in front of you. The village is alive with movement. Men, women, and children alike, dragging sledges, carrying baskets, clutching hatchets. Everyone is on firewood duty, because everyone knows one truth: no wood, no warmth. No warmth, no survival. No survival. People burned wood constantly, not just for heat, but for cooking, boiling water, baking bread, and sometimes even for crafting tools. Fires had to be fed from dawn till dusk. Historians still argue whether common villagers had easy access to forests, or whether greedy lords controlled every branch. In some places, peasants risked punishment if caught chopping down the lord's trees. In others, whole communities shared managed woodlands, cutting branches carefully so they'd regrow. Either way, you swing your hatchet carefully, thinking about how every strike counts. There's a rhythm to it. Chop, crack, haul. The smell of fresh wood clings to your hands. Splinters dig under your nails. Sweat runs down your back even in the freezing air, proof of just how much effort it takes to stay warm later. One villager jokes half serious that chopping wood warms you twice, once when you cut it, once when you burn it. Children scurry nearby, scavenging fallen twigs, giggling as they compete for the biggest bundle. You can't help but smile. At least they still find play in this desperate work. You imagine them in the future, bragging, "When I was your age, I carried firewood bigger than me through the snow." Some things never change. Back home, you pile the wood high against your cottage wall, careful to stack it off the ground so damp won't rot it. You eye your neighbor's pile, slightly larger than yours, and feel that tiny stab of envy. Maybe they've been working longer, maybe they had older sons to help, or maybe they just hoarded last year. Either way, wood envy is real. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but deep down, you know it does. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, people added dried animal dung to their fuel stores. Sounds gross, but it burned hot. In treeless areas, cow patties were shaped into cakes, left to dry in the sun, then stacked like pancakes made of, well, poop. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but when firewood ran low, no one complained about the smell. The fire inside your cottage is always hungry. You feed it like a pet that never gets full. Each log tossed on is a sigh of relief, but also a reminder the pile is shrinking. You ration carefully, too much at once, and you'll burn through your stock before February. Too little, and the cold creeps in, numbing fingers, stiffening joints. The trick is balance. At night, the fire dies down to embers. You bury them under ashes so they smolder until morning. Matches don't exist here. Starting a flame from scratch is slow and maddening. A glowing ember is gold. Tomorrow's fire, already alive, waiting to be coaxed back with a puff of breath and a little dry straw. Neighbors sometimes visit, exchanging gossip while helping one another cut wood. These moments of community matter. You swap stories, laugh a little, maybe complain about aching backs. Someone jokes about the Lord's forester rumored to have eyes sharper than an owl, catching anyone sneaking branches from forbidden groves. Historians still argue whether these rules were strictly enforced or more often ignored, but the fear lingers all the same. The truth is, winter turns firewood into currency. People trade bundles for bread, for cloth, even for favors. A small stack might buy goodwill from a neighbor when you're sick, and if times get desperate, a thief might risk sneaking into your yard at night, dragging away logs while you sleep. You check your pile twice before bed, muttering a quick prayer that it'll still be there in the morning. Snow begins to fall one afternoon as you haul another load. Fat flakes drift silently, landing on your hood and eyelashes. The woods turn hushed, the world softened by white. Beautiful, yes, but your heart clenches. Snow means travel is harder, hauling wood is slower, and every step takes twice the strength. You trudge on anyway, sled creaking behind you. Because what's the alternative? Sitting inside, shivering, wishing you had done more. You glance at your pile again that evening, stacked taller now, logs neatly arranged. It's not enough. It never feels enough. But for tonight, you relax. The fire roars in the hearth, shadows dancing on the daub walls, and the warmth seeps into your bones. You settle down with your family, listening to the crackle, and for a brief moment you believe you might just outlast the cold. Your eyes drift upward, and you notice the roof beams trembling under the weight of the season's first heavy snowfall. A medieval roof is never a sure thing. Thatched straw looks cozy in paintings, but in real life, it's an accident waiting to happen. One bad storm, one heavy load of wet snow, and suddenly, the ceiling isn't above you anymore, it's on top of you. So today, you join the village in a sort of rooftop parade. Ladders creak against timber walls, and men, women, even older children, scramble upward to beat snow off with poles. You clamber up yourself, gripping frozen rungs with stiff fingers, praying not to slip. The thatch is slick, brittle, and already sagging in places. You work quickly, sweeping snow aside, pressing new straw into gaps, smearing clay and moss into weak spots. Every handful matters, because tonight, the storm might return, and the roof is the only thing between your family and the sky. Thatched roofs had a rhythm of repair. They might last 20 years, if carefully tended, but only if you constantly patched, replaced, and monitored. Historians still argue whether peasants had access to good materials like reeds, or whether straw was all they could manage. Either way, you know your arms ache from hauling bundles up the ladder, stuffing them into place, then beating them flat with a wooden tool called a thatcher's beetle. Yes, that's actually what it was called. You smirk, imagining someone in the future confusing it with a giant insect superhero. While you're up there, you can see the village spread out in a winter hush. Thin smoke snakes from chimneys, curling into the pale sky. Paths between cottages are already packed with snow, trampled down by boots and sledges. Children toss snowballs below, shrieking in laughter, while their parents bark warnings not to get underfoot. For them, the storm is play. For you, it's pressure. Repairing the roof isn't just about comfort, it's about food. If leaks form, your precious stores of grain, beans, or dried fish might be ruined. Imagine waking to find your sacks soaked, mold crawling across your only hope for survival. One mistake on the roof today could mean hunger tomorrow. You mutter under your breath as you stuff straw into another gap. This isn't just maintenance, it's life insurance. The materials themselves carry stories. Straw from last summer's harvest, clay dug from a pit at the village edge, moss stripped from forest rocks. Even cow dung gets mixed in it, helps bind everything, sealing cracks against the biting wind. Yes, your roof is partly poop, and yes, you're grateful for it. You laugh softly, thinking how no medieval travel brochure ever bragged about organic cow dung insulation with rustic charm. Once you almost slip, your boot slides on a frosty patch, heart racing as you grab the ridgepole. Below, a neighbor chuckles, calling out a joke about angels catching fools who fall from roofs. You force a laugh back, though your stomach twists. Falling means broken bones, and broken bones in winter mean death. You keep your grip tight, moving slower now. When you climb down at last, your arms shake with exhaustion. Your cloak and tunic are smeared with mud, straw, and who knows what else. But the roof above your cottage looks tighter, firmer, more trustworthy. You step back, squint at it, and feel a flicker of pride. Inside, the air is warmer already. The wind no longer whistles through hidden cracks. Your children sleep easier tonight, curled under blankets, unaware of how much danger hovers just above them. You sit by the fire, watching smoke drift lazily up into the dark, and you wonder how many more storms the roof will endure before spring. Quirky detail for you: thatched roofs were notorious fire hazards. One spark, one stray ember, and the whole cottage could vanish in flames. Villagers told stories of houses burning so quickly that not even the cat escaped. Some communities even passed rules about where chimneys could sit, or how ovens must be built, to avoid disaster. You glance at the crackling fire in your own hearth, suddenly aware that the same flames keeping you alive could just as easily destroy everything. But tonight, you breathe easier. Snow taps against the newly patched roof, sliding harmlessly down instead of seeping inside. You tuck yourself closer to the fire, pull your cloak tighter, and let the storm rage. The roof holds, for now. You wake before dawn, breath fogging in the dark. The fire in the hearth has dwindled to glowing embers, and you shuffle across the dirt floor, shivering. Time to layer up. Clothes in a medieval village are not about looking stylish. They're about surviving another day. First, the linen shift, rough against your skin, but soft enough after years of wear. Over that, a wool tunic, scratchy and heavy, smelling faintly of sheep. Wool is your miracle fabric, it clings to warmth even when damp. You wrap wool leggings around your legs, tugging the ties tight, then stuff your feet into leather shoes lined with straw. They're stiff from yesterday's frost, and you wince as your toes press into them. Next comes your cloak, thick and patched, its edges frayed from years of use. If you're lucky, a strip of fur trims the hood, a hand-me-down from some better-off cousin. This is your armor against the cold. You pile on layers until you feel like a lumpy turnip, unable to bend easily, but better stiff than frozen. Historians still argue whether the average peasant had more than 2 sets of clothes. Some claim people wore the same garments until they fell apart, patching endlessly. Judging by the state of your sleeves, you believe it? Outside, you see others equally bundled neighbors, waddling like wool-wrapped onions. Children wear rag cloaks cut down from their parents' old garments, stitched with crooked seams. No one throws anything away. Old clothes are patched into rags, rags into mittens, mittens into padding for shoes. You once saw a man wearing a cloak so patched it looked like a checkerboard of every color wool in the village. Someone teased him about being a walking quilt, and he grinned. Better quilt than corpse. Fair point. Quirky fact. People sometimes stuffed straw or hay inside their clothes for extra insulation. Imagine rustling every time you move, like a scarecrow come to life. It worked, though, and when the temperature plummets, dignity is the first thing sacrificed. The air outside burns your nose, hairs. You tug your hood forward and shuffle to the woodpile. The snow squeaks under your shoes. Snow squeaks at certain temperatures. A sound sharp enough to make you grit your teeth. Your hands ache, even through wool mittens, and you stuff them under your arms to warm them. Layering isn't just about clothes. It's about survival strategy. At night, you and your family layer yourselves together under blankets. Everyone squeezes in, pressed hip to hip, breath mingling in the darkness. Livestock share the space too. Cows steaming in the corner, chickens rustling in baskets. Your cottage is a furnace of body heat, and though the smell is memorable, you learn to love it. After all, warmth is warmth, no matter where it comes from. There's a rhythm to dressing, too. You never remove all your layers at once, changing one garment at a time so your body doesn't lose heat. And bathing, forget it. You might splash your face with icy water, maybe scrub your hands with sand or straw, but a full wash in winter is rare. Not just because water is frozen solid, but because stripping down in this cold is asking for pneumonia. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed cold air itself made you sick, but you definitely act like it does. The colder the draft, the faster you pull your cloak tighter. You sleep with your head wrapped, sometimes with a cap pulled so low you look like a bundled gnome. Someone once joked that winter hats were invented so people wouldn't freeze their ears off. Probably not true. But it feels right. Children complain about the itchiness of wool. You laugh and tell them to scratch harder. Better itchy than frozen, you say, though you secretly miss the smoothness of summer linen against bare skin. You make another mental note to thank the sheep come spring. Without them, the whole village would be naked, shivering statues. Later that day, you visit the blacksmith. He's bundled too, his forge glowing like the sun. You warm your hands near the heat, almost jealous of his year-round excuse to stay beside fire. He hammers nails, repairs buckles, fixes worn shoes with iron tips so they don't wear through the snow. You joke with him, asking if he can forge an extra layer of skin. He smirks, hammer ringing, sparks flying. By evening, you've grown used to the weight of your clothing. The cloak swishes as you move, the tunic tugs at your shoulders, the hood presses against your cheeks. You're tired, heavy, but alive. You sit by the hearth, remove your mittens, and rub your sore hands. Tomorrow will be the same, layering up, trudging out, patching, repairing, surviving. Quirky villagers whisper that wearing red keeps out the cold. Some say it's the color of warmth itself, tricking the body. You look at your own dull brown tunic and sigh. Maybe next winter, you'll ask the weaver for a splash of red, if only to test the superstition. For now, you settle into the warmth of the fire, wool scratchy against your skin, grateful for every sheep that made it possible. Night falls early now, shadows stretching long over the snow. Inside the cottage, the fire flickers low, throwing orange across the daub walls. You're tired from hauling wood and patching the roof. But you know warmth doesn't only come from fire, it also comes from body. In winter, medieval families transform into one big, slightly smelly huddle of survival. You spread blankets, rough wool, patched and heavy across the straw mattress. Then comes the shuffle, children first, tumbling down like puppies. Grandparents next, groaning into the pile. You and your partner last, squeezing into the middle. Privacy. That's a luxury nobody here can afford. Bed sharing is necessity. The more bodies together, the warmer the space. Even livestock play a role. A cow rests in the corner, steaming softly, while chickens cluck in their wicker baskets, giving off faint heat. You lie there, thinking how your cottage has basically turned into a medieval heated blanket, powered by family and farm animals. At first, the closeness makes you restless. Elbows jab, feet tangle, your youngest wriggles like a fish. But slowly, your breathing syncs with theirs. The air fills with warmth, with the smell of wool and hay and smoke. You almost forget how bitter it is outside. Almost. Mainstream fact time. Bed sharing wasn't just for peasants. Even wealthier families did it, especially children and servants. Big feather beds in manor houses often had 3, 4, even 5 people piled in. Space was precious, and firewood scarce. The idea of everyone having their own bed, pure fantasy for most. Historians still argue whether this closeness fostered stronger family bonds, or just more grumbling. But either way, everyone accepted it. And then there's the fringe detail, the so-called two sleeps. Some scholars argue medieval people didn't sleep in one long stretch, but instead, in 2 chunks, with a waking period in between. Imagine, you all huddle together, drift off, then wake around midnight. You whisper, stoke the fire, maybe pray, talk, or even step outside under the stars before curling back down for second sleep. Nobody's fully sure if every villager did this, but the idea lingers in diaries and records. You think about it as you lie awake, listening to snores and the cow's soft sigh. Maybe you'll try it tonight. Half sleep, half dream. Quirky superstition. Some say evil spirits slip in during sleep if you leave too much space between bodies. So everyone presses close, as if the warmth isn't reason enough. Children believe it, clinging tighter, eyes wide in the dark. You chuckle, promising to swat away any ghost that dares. But you still shift nearer, just in case. The bed isn't just for sleep either. On long winter nights, families whisper stories, sing songs, or recite prayers in the pile. You tell a riddle simple enough for the children, silly enough to make them laugh. Laughter warms too, in its own way. Sometimes you hum a tune, voice muffled under blankets, and soon everyone joins. A shaky chorus against the howling wind outside. The cottage becomes its own little world. Outside, darkness, frost, wolves, maybe prowling in the woods. Inside, heat, breath, and the soft murmur of family. You stretch your toes, feeling the edge of the mattress straw poking through. Not comfortable, not luxurious, but you've got warmth, and warmth is wealth. In the morning you wake tangled together, hair mussed, cloaks twisted. The youngest drools on your arm, your back aches, but your body is warm. That's the only measure that matters. You sit up slowly, stoke the embers back to flame, and start another day of the long winter grind. You think back to the first frost, and realize you're learning the rhythm. Firewood by day, shared warmth by night, layering clothes, patching roofs, rationing food. Each action, each choice, is a little bargain with the season. I'll give you my labor if you'll give me one more day of survival. As you wrap your cloak and step outside, you notice fresh snow glittering under the pale sun. Your breath curls white. Your family stirs inside. The cow shifts, the chickens cluck. You smile faintly. You're still here. For now, that's victory enough. Your boots crunch into the icy crust, and every step feels like a reminder that food doesn't walk itself to your cottage. Winter may blanket the world in silence, but your stomach doesn't respect the season. It growls like a small, angry dog. You grab the bow strung tight last night and a handful of arrows, each one precious, each one prayed over. Hunting isn't a pastime here. It's the difference between soup and starvation. The forest greets you with eerie stillness. Branches sag under snow, and every breath makes a puff that lingers. You follow the faint tracks of a hare, hoping the little creature hasn't outsmarted you again. Rabbits are fast, clever, and often end up laughing at you from their burrows at least. That's how it feels. But tonight, with the cold gnawing your fingers, you're determined. You crouch low, heart thumping, arrow knocked. A flicker of movement. Yes, there it is. The hare's white tail darting across the snow. You let fly. The bow twangs, the arrow whistles, and thunk. Not a kill, but a miss that buries itself in a tree. You mutter under your breath, then glance around as if anyone saw your failure. Don't worry though. Even experienced hunters sometimes go home empty. And let's be honest, you're more used to spearing fish in summer than chasing snow rabbits. Mainstream fact. Medieval peasants weren't allowed to hunt deer or boar freely. Forest laws reserved the king's game for nobles, meaning villagers had to be sneaky. Poaching was dangerous. Caught with a deer, you might lose a hand. But small animals like rabbits, squirrels, and birds, those were fair game, though still tricky to catch. Historians still argue whether the strictness of these forest laws really stopped hungry villagers, or whether most quietly broke them, bow in hand. Your stomach doesn't care about royal law. You scan again, and this time, luck favors you. A fat pheasant clucks nearby, its feathers bright against the snow. You move slow, draw, release. The arrow strikes true. You whisper thanks, not just out of habit, but out of relief. Tonight, there'll be meat in the pot. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed saying a charm before loosing an arrow made it fly straighter. A rhyme or whispered spell, often learned from elders, like feather to feather. Strike through the weather. Did it work? Probably not, but it gave shaky hands some confidence. You try it now, murmuring the words as you collect the bird. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was the charm. Either way, dinner secured. Your satchel is heavier, but your body colder. Fingers numb, you hurry back, toward the cottage. The path crunches, the forest creaks, and in the distance, you hear a wolf's howl. You don't stop to admire. Wolves are beautiful until they're hungry. Better to keep moving. Back home, the cottage glows faintly. Inside, your family gathers round as you display the bird. Children cheer, the cow moves disinterestedly, and your partner gets to work plucking feathers. You help gut and clean it, tossing the innards into the pig's trough outside. Nothing wasted. The pheasant roasts over the fire, smell filling the room. Your mouth waters, and you laugh at yourself. It's been weeks since anything this rich touched your lips. Most nights, you've been on pottage, a thick, mushy stew of beans, grains, and whatever vegetables survived storage. Tonight though, you'll gnaw bones and lick fat off fingers. A feast, by winter standards. You notice your youngest eyeing the bird like a hawk. Patience, you whisper. But when the meal is served, steaming and oily, everyone grabs eagerly. You chew slowly, savoring every bite. The warmth spreads through your chest, almost making you forget the frost creeping at the door. Almost later, as you scrape the bones clean, you tuck the feathers aside. They'll stuff a pillow or line a cloak. You're living proof of a simple truth. In winter, nothing goes unused. Even failures like that arrow still stuck in a tree become lessons. Your belly finally quiet. You stretch before the fire, listening to the pop of sap in the logs. Survival may be brutal, but tonight, at least, you've won a small victory. And victories, in this season, are everything. The smell of roasting pheasant lingers as you make your way to the village oven. It's not a personal oven, you don't have that luxury, but a large shared stone structure where everyone bakes their bread in shifts. You trudge across packed snow, the edges of your cloak stiffed with frost, and exchange greetings with neighbors, all bundled like walking woolly sculptures. The oven is warm, glowing, almost a sanctuary in the frozen village. Communal baking is more than convenience, it's survival. One family couldn't fire an oven properly, and the bread would be ruined. So everyone cooperates, waiting their turn, exchanging small kindnesses. A loaf for a bundle of kindling, a slice for some lard. Historians still argue whether these ovens were strictly regulated by village authorities or simply managed by tradition. But the effect is the same: warmth, food, and a little social glue in a harsh season. You slap down a lump of dough, kneading it quickly with frozen fingers. The flour sticks to your gloves, snow dusted across the work surface. It's rough work, but satisfying. You mold each loaf carefully, imagining the golden crust it will have after baking. A successful bake can feed your family for days, stretching the meager winter stores a little further. Quirky detail: some bakers added herbs, or even crushed ashes, to the dough. Ash in bread sounds odd, but it was believed to help preserve it longer. You wrinkle your nose at the memory of tasting it as a child, the gray specks gritty under your teeth. Modern bakers might grimace, but hey, in the dead of February, you take what you can get. Children circle around, eager to see the dough rise and the loaves slip into the oven. Their faces flush pink from cold and excitement. You smile at them, remembering your own small hands pressing floury lumps in past winters. The village oven is more than food. It's a lesson, a ritual, a heartbeat of community life. The fire inside the oven roars, and you rotate loaves with a wooden paddle, careful not to burn your gloves. Smoke curls up, mingling with the scent of warm bread, wood, and straw. The room vibrates with murmurs, laughter, and the occasional cough. Winter illnesses lurk, but for now, warmth and routine dominate. Meanwhile, neighbors trade tips. One woman swears adding a pinch of salt to the dough will keep it from freezing inside, while another insists that shaping loaves into round discs rather than long loaves helps them bake more evenly. You listen, absorb, and try to implement each trick. Survival, you remind yourself, is often equal parts tradition, observation, and trial and error. When your loaves emerge, golden and steaming, you feel a small triumph. Bread in winter is more than sustenance, it's hope. It's normalcy. It's a reminder that the village endures. You carry the loaves home carefully, trying not to drop any in the snow. Once back inside, the family gathers, grateful for even the simplest crust. The fire roars beneath the hearthstones. You unwrap the warm bread, and for a moment, the cold outside seems less threatening. You tuck the empty paddle back into its place, glance at the glowing embers, and think about how the village survives. Together, patiently, creatively. Food, warmth, and cooperation. These are the true weapons against the relentless cold. Even as frost etches the windows and snow piles against the walls, you remember that winter is harsh, but not unbeatable. The loaves sit on the table, filling the cottage with that irresistible aroma, but water is frozen solid outside. You reach for your mug, remembering a harsh truth. Drinking ice-cold water is risky, and you've been warned countless times not to. Instead, you reach for the village's winter staple ale, or rather, the weak beer that keeps the locals hydrated without freezing in the cup. Yes, beer in winter is safer than water. You sip cautiously, warming your hands on the mug, savoring the slight sweetness, the warmth trickling down. Historians still argue exactly how weak this small beer was, but suffice it to say, it's barely alcoholic. You chuckle, thinking how your modern self might scoff at such a drink, but today, it's liquid gold. You notice your youngest eagerly sucking from a small wooden cup, unaware they're technically drinking something brewed. In this village, that's normal, not scandalous. Winter thirst is relentless, but snow and ice can't always be melted safely. The ale keeps your insides warm, your stomach full, and your spirits higher. You glance around at your neighbors. They're all sipping similarly, exchanging quiet stories, while watching the wind whip snow against their windows. In some villages, this weak beer was brewed daily, a routine as essential as chopping wood or patching the roof. Quirky detail: some villagers believed that adding herbs like sage or rosemary to beer could stave off chills or ward off winter spirits. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but secretly wonder if it helps psychologically. After all, if your grandmother swears it works, maybe it does. Superstition and necessity blur together in these months. Your fingers, still stiff from hauling firewood earlier, are relieved by the warm cup. The ale's steam curls like ghosts, whispering promises of endurance. Children drink cautiously, careful not to tip the wooden cups, while elders nod knowingly, already seasoned in the ways of winter hydration. After a few sips, you feel a spark of energy. Tasks remain. Tend the animals, check the fire, repair torn clothing. Winter doesn't pause because you want to rest. The beer is a temporary companion, a small comfort that fuels you for the next stretch of labor. Outside, snow continues to fall, coating the village in white silence. You imagine it covering footprints, masking hazards, turning familiar paths treacherous. You glance at your neighbors trudging past, sledges laden with firewood. Even this small community, tightly knit by necessity, feels fragile against the relentless cold. But each mug of weak beer, each loaf of bread, each patched roof, that's the armor holding the winter at bay. Later, as you pour a final sip, you reflect on the strange balance of survival. Simple pleasures, like a warm drink, carry as much weight as practical labor. Your ancestors, you realize, were masters of small victories. You cradle the mug, savoring the warmth, and wonder at the ingenuity that keeps a village alive when everything outside seems designed to stop life itself. The aroma of fresh bread and the warmth of your modest ale settle over the cottage. But winter, in a medieval village, is a constant push and pull between feast and famine, celebration and restraint. Today, you notice the calendar marked with a feast, St. Lucy's Day, perhaps, or the start of Advent. The village will gather, share whatever treats remain, and remind themselves that even in the bleakest cold, life continues. You trudge to the communal hall, layers of wool weighing down every movement. Inside, neighbors are already arranging what meager supplies they have: dried meats, nuts, root vegetables, and, of course, the indispensable bread. You glance at the children, cheeks rosy from frost, and smile. The hall is alive with laughter, though quieter than in warmer seasons. Candles flicker, casting long shadows on timber walls, illuminating patched tunics, fur-lined cloaks, and the occasional hat shaped like a mouse or fox. Feasts in winter aren't lavish. They're symbolic, reminders of community and endurance. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were more religious devotion or social necessity, but for you, they're both. You share a modest loaf with a neighbor, passing a cup of weak ale. Conversation hums in the background: gossip, advice, prayers, quiet complaints. You nibble dried meat, savoring the taste because, in February, every morsel feels like a triumph. Quirky detail: some villagers believed that if you saved a pinch of bread from the feast, placing it under your pillow would ward off nightmares all winter. You chuckle, tucking a small crumb in your cloak pocket just in case. Modern logic scoffs, but the ritual brings comfort. Superstition and habit intertwined. After the feasting, fasting begins. Lent may be far off, or perhaps some are observing local fast days to conserve food. You nibble conservatively, sharing space with those who have less. In winter, rationing is not a moral choice, it's survival. The hunger gnaws, yes, but the feast reminds everyone that food exists, that warmth is possible, and that hope is not entirely buried under snow. Outside, the wind rattles the windows. Snowdrifts block paths, and icicles hang like daggers from the eaves. Inside, the hall buzzes softly with warmth, bodies pressed together, voices low but steady. You notice the rhythm of medieval life: work, rest, ritual, repeat. Even the cold cannot break it entirely. By nightfall, you return home, carrying the small leftovers. Grateful for warmth and company, the children settle quickly, curls of hair sticking to straw-stuffed pillows. You stoke the hearth, Sip the last of your weak ale and reflect on the tiny victories of the day. Celebration, restraint, and community all are tools as important as coats, cloaks, and patched boots when facing the harsh winter months. The village may sleep under frost and snow, but life persists. One loaf, one shared cup, one small laugh at a child's joke. These are the moments that carry you through, reminding you that even the bitterest cold has its soft, human heart. The wind howls outside, rattling shutters and tossing snow against the walls. But inside your cottage, morning light filters weakly through frosted windows. You stretch, feeling the familiar ache in your back and shoulders from days of hauling wood, patching roofs, and keeping the fire alive. Winter doesn't allow rest for the weary, but it does reward planning, patience, and a little stubbornness. Your first task is the animals. They are more than companions. They're your thermostat, your refrigerator, your very livelihood. The cow in the corner snorts, breath steaming, eyes blinking slowly in the morning glow. Chickens shuffle and peck at straw, their feathers fluffed against the cold. You carefully break the ice on water troughs, refill them, and make sure each animal has enough feed. A thin line of frost has formed along the barn walls, and you swear you can hear it whispering about the days to come. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers fully understood animal nutrition or relied on tradition and observation, but whatever knowledge they had kept livestock alive through brutal winters. After feeding, you check on your stored grains and root vegetables. Barrels of turnips, carrots, and dried beans sit in cool, dark corners. You inspect each, tossing out anything spoiled. Storage is tricky. Too damp, and the vegetables rot. Too dry, and they shrivel. Every bit counts. Fringe fact. Some families buried vegetables in straw-lined pits beneath the floorboards of their cottages to protect them from freezing, essentially creating an early version of a root cellar. You adjust a few sacks, pressing straw around them, grateful for centuries of trial and error wisdom. Next comes clothing maintenance. You inspect mittens, cloaks, and wool tunics for holes. A torn sleeve isn't just inconvenient, it's a cold sleeve. You sit by the embers, darning with thick needles, threading wool into stubborn gaps. Every stitch is both work and defense, a personal battle against frostbite and discomfort. Quirky tidbit. Villagers sometimes stitched small bits of animal fur inside gloves and boots for extra insulation, turning garments into patchwork heaters. Modern fashion would cringe, but medieval survival applauds it. Outside, the snow gleams in the morning light, deceptively peaceful. You trudge to the communal well or, in this case, the frozen remnant of it scraping away ice to fetch water. The journey is slow, gloves wet, boots stiff. Each step is a reminder that winter is relentless, and your legs are not what they used to be after weeks of hauling wood. You catch glimpses of other villagers doing the same, shivering together, murmuring greetings, all united by necessity. By midday, the hearth is stoked, the animals fed, water collected, and clothing repaired. You pause, sipping a small amount of weak ale to warm your core, and look around your cottage. The walls smell of smoke and straw. The floor creaks with familiar groans. The air feels lived in, warm, and alive. You sit for a moment, letting the rhythm of medieval winter life sink in. Prepare, protect, preserve. Every action feeds the next. Every choice matters. You glance at the children, now trying to play with scraps of straw on the floor. You smile, knowing the world outside is harsh. But in here, ingenuity, care, and a little luck create small sanctuaries of warmth and laughter. Winter may stretch on, but you've survived another morning, and that's as good as victory gets. The morning sun struggles to pierce the heavy gray clouds, casting a pale, cold light across the village. You step outside, boots crunching over snow, hardened by frost and foot traffic, and immediately feel the bite of winter against your cheeks. Each inhale sends a chill down your spine, and you wrap your cloak tighter, remembering that in a medieval village, every layer matters. Today's task is simple in description but vital in consequence. Foraging for winter greens and whatever roots might still be salvaged from the frozen fields. Walking across the village, you pass neighbors already at work. One man hacks stubborn ice from a partially frozen well. Another tends a chicken coop, and a small group of children haul snow to melt for water. Everyone moves with careful purpose, conserving energy while accomplishing essential chores. You realize that medieval winter is less about leisure and more about a slow, continuous negotiation with the elements. One misstep, one frozen water supply, or one missed meal could snowball into real danger. Historians still argue whether these routines were strictly learned from necessity or passed down as a sort of survival ritual. Either way, repetition breeds skill, and you see its value with every careful movement. You bend down near the edge of a frost-bitten field. Beneath the thin layer of snow, you scrape at the soil with a small hand tool. Carrots, turnips, and parsnips stubbornly resist extraction, frozen solid. Your hands ache despite thick gloves, and your knees press into the icy ground. It's tedious work, but essential. Every root you retrieve feeds your family, prevents hunger, and gives you a sense of agency against the relentless cold. Fringe detail. Some villagers inserted straw into the ground around exposed vegetables to help insulate them during foraging. You apply the same tactic, patting the soil before digging, a trick your grandmother swore by, and that has now saved several roots from freezing solid. As you gather the harvest, you notice subtle signs of winter wildlife, a rabbit track skimming across the snow, a flock of birds huddled near the edge of a woodlot, a fox disappearing between trees. Each movement reminds you that survival is not yours alone. You share the frozen forest with other creatures, all navigating the scarcity. You remember the pheasant you caught last week and marvel at the balance of life and death, the rhythm of giving and taking that winter imposes on the world. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers believed that if you whispered to plants while harvesting in winter, they would give their energy willingly, producing a sweeter or more nourishing taste. You chuckle, half-heartedly whispering to the stiff, frost-laden greens. Surely it's superstition, but in a season ruled by uncertainty, a little hope goes a long way. By midday, your collection is modest but sufficient. Several roots, handfuls of hardy greens, and a few sprigs of herbs that survived frost. You return home, muscles aching, cheeks stinging, but with a quiet satisfaction. You stash the harvest in barrels lined with straw, rotating older stock to the top to prevent spoilage. The act feels almost ceremonial. Hands work, body shivers, breath clouds in the cold. But the small reward of sustenance reinforces the rhythm of village life. Inside the cottage, you stir a pot of pottage, adding roots, greens, and a small piece of salted meat. The aroma spreads, filling the cold corners with warmth and comfort. Children gather, rubbing hands over the hearthstones, inhaling deeply. Even the cow in the corner seems to relax slightly, steam curling from its nostrils. Quirky yet practical, this daily routine transforms survival into a structured ritual, blending necessity with a kind of domestic artistry. After the meal, you step outside again to check the livestock. Chickens shuffle under the eaves, pecking through scattered feed. The cow munches steadily on hay, tail swishing lazily, despite the chill. You add more straw to the bedding, ensuring insulation for the long night ahead. Each small act feeding, covering, stacking seems mundane until you imagine the alternative. Frostbitten animals, frozen water, and empty stomachs. You shiver, but push on, understanding that survival is cumulative. Countless tiny, repetitive gestures knit together a fragile winter armor. Evening approaches, and the village hums with a soft, muted energy. Smoke curls from chimneys, footprints mark the snow, and the occasional wolf howl echoes from distant woods. You carry a lantern along the path, returning to your cottage with an armful of firewood and the satisfaction of a day spent preparing, sustaining, and surviving. Historians still argue whether medieval people saw winter primarily as a season of fear or as a time for rhythm and adaptation. But for you, it is both. Settling by the hearth, you rub sore fingers, sip a small portion of weak ale, and watch the fire glow. The day's work harvesting roots, preparing food, tending animals, and collecting wood feels like a quiet triumph. You glance at the children, eyes heavy with sleep, and think about the continuity of these rituals. The accumulated knowledge passed down through generations, the subtle artistry of everyday survival, quirky superstition, clever adaptation, communal cooperation, all threads in the fabric of winter life. As snow falls outside and embers glow inside, you feel the subtle satisfaction of enduring. Winter is relentless, yes, but through preparation, warmth, food, and family, you have carved out a small victory. Each root dug, each blanket layered, each ember fed contributes to a rhythm that has allowed villagers like you to persist through centuries of bitter frost. The day ends with the quiet reassurance that though the storm rages beyond your walls, life, ingenuity, and resilience remain firmly in your hands. Dawn creeps slowly across the snow-covered village, pale light glinting off icicles that hang like glass daggers from eaves. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside, boots crunching rhythmically in the frozen path. Today's mission is clear: repair and reinforce the fences surrounding the livestock. Winter storms can collapse weak structures, leaving animals exposed to wind, predators, or simply wandering off into the snow. You know the stakes. Every plank, every stake, every knot could mean life or death for the animals that sustain your family. You grab a bundle of spare wood, worn but serviceable, and a small hammer. The frost has made everything stiff and brittle, and your fingers ache inside thick gloves. You work methodically, replacing broken slats and tightening joints, listening to the satisfying thunk as nails bite into frozen timber. Villagers often worked in pairs or small groups, swapping advice and joking about each other's clumsy repairs. You remember the neighbor last week, whose fence collapsed under a goat's weight, muttering something about the goat's evil winter magic. Historians still argue whether such communal labor was strictly for efficiency or also for social cohesion, but either way, it creates warmth in more ways than one quirky detail. Some people smeared a mixture of clay and animal fat onto wooden fences to help seal cracks and keep them from rotting in winter. It smells faintly earthy and pungent, but it works. You apply a thin layer to one post, muttering to yourself about the ingenuity of past generations and wondering whether modern engineers would ever consider dung in clay a legitimate building material. Children trudge along behind you, eager to help. They carry small sticks or hammer tiny nails, proud of contributing despite their stubby fingers and cold toes. You supervise, giving gentle corrections, and marvel at how much knowledge is passed down by doing rather than teaching. Observation, practice, repetition. This is how a medieval child learns to survive. Once the fences are sturdy, you move on to checking the animal shelters. Straw bedding must be replenished, roofs patched, and water containers scraped free of ice. A frozen trough is a catastrophe waiting to happen. You kneel by the cow, rubbing its flanks to coax warmth into stiff muscles. Even the animals seem to recognize the rhythm of winter. Feed, rest, conserve, repeat. You pause briefly to catch your breath, looking out at the village spread in soft white silence. Snow muffles sounds, lending an almost sacred quiet. The occasional crack of a branch or distant cluck of a chicken punctuates the stillness. You realize that winter's survival is a delicate balance of labor, vigilance, and improvisation. Even a small mistake, a missed plank, a neglected water source, an unpatched hole could have cascading consequences. After hours of work, You gather the tools and return home, cold and stiff but satisfied. Inside, the hearth glows warmly, casting dancing shadows across the walls. You tend the fire carefully, feeding it small logs to maintain a steady flame. Your partner begins preparing pottage for dinner, and the children cluster near the embers, drawing heat like magnets. Quirky superstition. Some villagers sprinkled salt along the edges of fences to ward off evil spirits and encourage protective winter energies. You smile, shaking your head at the thought, yet quietly sprinkle a pinch yourself. After all, if it helps maintain morale and belief, it may be just as important as the nails and timber. As the day ends, snow continues to fall gently, dusting the reinforced fences and fresh footprints in pristine white. You sit by the hearth, sipping a small portion of weak ale, reflecting on the subtle artistry of survival. Every plank replaced, every nail driven, every straw fluffed, contributes to a rhythm of endurance honed over generations. In the heart of winter, the village survives not through wealth or power, but through knowledge, cooperation, and persistent care. Finally, you glance at the sleeping children, bodies bundled together, blankets pressed tight. The cow rests quietly, and the chickens settle into their nests. You feel a small, almost private triumph. The fences hold, the animals are safe, the fire burns steadily. Winter is relentless, yes, but today, like yesterday, you have prevailed. The woodpile is no longer a neat stack of logs against your cottage, it's your treasure chest, your fortress, your insurance policy against winter itself. You look at it the way someone in the modern world might look at a bank account balance. Every log is a coin, every bundle of kindling a little deposit, and when the frost bites harder, you'll be spending fast. So, today you trudge into the woods. The frost crunches beneath your boots, and your breath smokes in front of you. The village is alive with movement, men, women, and children alike, dragging sledges, carrying baskets, clutching hatchets. Everyone is on firewood duty, because everyone knows one truth: no wood, no warmth. No warmth, no survival. No survival. People burned wood, constantly, not just for heat, but for cooking, boiling water, baking bread, and sometimes even for crafting tools. Fires had to be fed from dawn till dusk. Historians still argue whether common villagers had easy access to forests, or whether greedy lords controlled every branch. In some places, peasants risked punishment if caught chopping down the lord's trees. In others, whole communities shared managed woodlands, cutting branches carefully so they'd regrow. Either way, you swing your hatchet carefully, thinking about how every strike counts. There's a rhythm to it. Chop, crack, haul. The smell of fresh wood clings to your hands. Splinters dig under your nails. Sweat runs down your back even in the freezing air, proof of just how much effort it takes to stay warm later. One villager jokes half serious that chopping wood warms you twice, once when you cut it, once when you burn it. Children scurry nearby, scavenging fallen twigs, giggling as they compete for the biggest bundle. You can't help but smile. At least they still find play in this desperate work. You imagine them in the future, bragging, "When I was your age, I carried firewood bigger than me through the snow." Some things never change. Back home, you pile the wood high against your cottage wall, careful to stack it off the ground so damp won't rot it. You eye your neighbor's pile, slightly larger than yours, and feel that tiny stab of envy. Maybe they've been working longer, maybe they had older sons to help, or maybe they just hoarded last year. Either way, wood envy is real. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but deep down, you know it does. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, snow continues to fall in thick, swirling drifts, blanketing the village in white silence. You step outside again, this time for the daily wood gathering ritual. Firewood is life itself. Without it, the hearth dies, and so does warmth, food, and comfort. You heft a bundle of logs onto your shoulder, feeling the chill bite through your layers despite the thick wool tunic and fur-lined cloak. Your muscles ache from the repetition, but your body has grown accustomed to this rhythm. Lift, carry, stack, repeat. The forest looms ahead, a quiet cathedral of frost-laden branches. Each tree is a potential resource, each fallen branch a treasure. You sift through piles of twigs and branches, mindful of the weight and dryness. Wet wood smolders useless in a storm, while dry wood roars and sustains the fire for hours. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers fully understood which types of wood burned best, or whether observation alone guided their choices. Either way, experience teaches you quickly. Oak, ash, and birch are your reliable allies. Pine to resinous, spruce to smoky. Quirky detail: some villagers marked particularly good firewood with small carvings or painted symbols, believing it brought luck or extra warmth. You chuckle as you spot a faint X on a sturdy branch, imagining a medieval kid scrawling protective runes on sticks instead of comic books. Superstition and practicality coexist in every action here, creating a rhythm of survival and belief. As you gather wood, you notice animal tracks crisscrossing the snow: rabbit, fox, and occasionally deer. Each track tells a story of life continuing outside human dwellings. You pause, imagining the creature's winter struggle alongside your own. Survival is a communal effort across species, and the balance is delicate. One harsh storm, one wolf's hunt, or one frozen patch of ground could tip it all. Returning to the village, you pass neighbors engaged in similar work. Some carry bundles, with children riding atop. Others use sledges to transport heavy loads. Everyone communicates in muffled tones over the wind, exchanging advice or joking about frostbitten fingers. Community is essential. Alone, the forest would be unforgiving. Together, survival becomes achievable. Back at the cottage, you unload the logs carefully, stacking them to maximize airflow and minimize dampness. Even minor mistakes, poor stacking, hidden snow under logs, could doom the fire. You arrange the wood near the hearth, ready for immediate use. You pat the stack with satisfaction, knowing that each log represents warmth, cooked meals, and long nights of shared family presence. The children help, dragging small twigs and branches inside. They chatter about snow angels and imaginary battles, infusing the work with laughter that warms more than the hearth ever could. You watch, smiling, remembering your own childhood winters filled with similar toil and delight. These small joys, quiet victories, and daily labors define the rhythm of winter life. As evening approaches, the hearth burns bright. The cottage smells of wood smoke and straw, a comforting blend that defines home in the harsh season. You sip a small portion of weak ale, watching flames dance across the walls, reflecting on the network of knowledge, labor, superstition, and communal support that keeps the village alive. Outside, snow piles higher. The wind rattles eaves, but inside, warmth, routine, and human ingenuity prevail. Finally, you glance at your sleeping family. Their breaths rise and fall in a soft rhythm, bodies bundled tightly. The fire crackles. The stacked wood promises warmth. The village endures. And in this small victory against winter's unyielding force, you feel the quiet satisfaction that has carried generations before you. Survival, small but absolute. The wind outside has softened, snow drifting lazily rather than raging in gusts. You sit by the hearth, letting its warmth seep slowly into your chilled bones, watching the last embers glow a deep orange before fading into soft gray ash. The day's labors feeding animals, patching fences, gathering firewood, preparing meals have receded into a rhythm, a gentle pulse of survival that carries you through the long night. You breathe slowly, letting the tension of frozen fields, icy paths, and bitter winds melt, if only for a moment, in the cozy cocoon of your cottage. Outside, The village rests under a blanket of snow, each roof glinting faintly in moonlight, smoke curling upward from chimneys like quiet exhalations. The animals are settled, the children tucked beneath blankets, the hearth maintained. You think of the countless winters lived this way, and a quiet awe settles over you. There is resilience here, a steady heartbeat of human ingenuity and cooperation, of tiny victories stacked together to defy the relentless cold. Every loaf of bread, every patched tunic, every ember nurtured carries meaning beyond itself. It is proof that life continues, that the world outside may be harsh, but inside, warmth and care persist. You let your eyes close for a moment, listening to the soft crackle of the fire, the occasional stir of a child, the distant whisper of wind. The bitter cold seems further away, softened by layers of wool, straw, laughter, and memory. Historians may debate the details, and some stories may seem strange or superstitious now, but the essence remains timeless. Survival in winter is never solitary. It is a mosaic of family, community, craft, and hoped out. Now, you inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and let the quiet of the night settle fully. Your body, your mind, your heart all are warmed by the gentle reassurance of continuity. Outside, winter waits, patient and unyielding, but inside, you rest safely. Wrapped in the rhythms of life, togetherness, and perseverance,